Hi guys, my name is Rebecca Diaz, for those of you who don't know me, and I am in the BM MAT program here at Westminster, where I should be graduating this next May. For this assignment, the definition that I chose was, curriculum is an explicitly and implicitly intentional set of interactions designed to facilitate learning and development and to impose meaning on experience. The explicit intentions usually are expressed in the written curricula and in courses of study. The implicit intentions are found in the hidden curriculum, by which we mean the roles and norms that underlie interactions in the school. In order to answer the first question of what this definition brings to the discussion of music curriculum, I think it needs to be unpacked. This first sentence and the entire definition is packed with very important keywords and phrases that need to be more clearly gone into. So it starts with the word explicit, which is defined as stated clearly and in detail, leaving no room for confusion or doubt. Then it moves to the word implicit, implied, though not plainly expressed. And then after we get that, we get intentional interactions. Things that the educator plans for through formal planning or less formal planning. After reading the Elliott and Silverman chapter, I kind of figured this out to be imagining the teaching and learning situation and how I would respond, or phrases that I could use that could bring humor into the classroom. So what can I do to interact with the students that will make their experience better or more meaningful? And in the chapter, they write, what characterizes professional teaching is the centrality of thoughtful actions directed towards bringing about learning, and that's on page 403. Further in the chapter, on page 410, they highlight the fact that teacher interaction with students make the classroom a productive and enjoyable experience, not a lesson plan, even the most detailed of lesson plans. Detailed plans do not mean a lesson will go well, or it won't go well, or if the curriculum will succeed, or if learning will occur. That depends on the intentional interactions that happen between the teacher and the students. The definition of curriculum then goes to facilitate learning and development and impose meaning on experience. I was originally going to separate these two phrases into two separate categories, but I think they go hand in hand. To facilitate means to make easier, and I believe that by bringing meaning to experience, learning becomes easier. If the content is relevant to their lives, there may be less resistance on the part of the students when approaching a difficult subject. If the educator does not place secondary dominant chords in a context that is relevant to me, then the already difficult topic becomes more difficult and I really don't care about it. Explicit intentions are expressed in written curriculum and in the courses of study. This is where the curriculum meets the standards that it's supposed to meet. If the fine arts supervisor wants the fourth graders to be able to do a particular rhythmic pattern by the 15th of January, the written curriculum is where the music educator proves appropriate scaffolding to reach that point where they would be able to do that. Implicit intentions are found in the hidden curriculum. One of the main reasons that I chose this particular definition was because of this phrase. The explicit curriculum teaches the students what is important and also what is not important. If the explicit curriculum focuses on Western, classical, dead white guy music, the implicit curriculum teaches the students that folk music and hip hop and rap and music from their own cultures are not important because we're not doing them in the classroom. So if they're not important enough for me to bring here to where everyone has to learn it, then I guess it's not important at all, right? If the explicit curriculum is teacher-centered with few opportunities for students to share their musical knowledge, the implicit curriculum teaches that the students are not good enough to be musicians on their own, and that their personal music knowledge is not necessary for the teaching and learning situation. And we know that's not true. We know that students come to the classroom with tons of musical experiences that they can share and that are very important. And I think that all students need to be validated, because if they aren't validated, then they don't have a very high self-worth, and they think that what has happened in their own lives might not be as important, which isn't right. So the limitations of this definition, I think, is that it doesn't mention A, the reflexivity of teaching and learning, and B, the importance of authentic musical practices. However, to go along with our discussion of explicit and implicit, I think these things are implied. In order for interactions to be intentional, teachers have to reflect on their own place in the students' lives, and on their place in the school community, and their place in the larger society. As a young Brazilian woman, I have to be aware that everything I do or do not do can change the way students can perceive me, females who hold positions of authority over them, and others who share my ethnic heritage. And in the chapter, the Elliott and Silverman chapter, the authors write, hence, teachers will ultimately be guided by what they think, know, and decide during their interactions with students. The way that educators interact has to be informed by their past experiences with students and by their past experiences as a person in a social world. Students must also be able to reflect on their words and actions, which I believe should be explicitly included in a school music curriculum. By creating student-centered curriculums, students would have to think about what music is important to them outside of the music school context. And periods of student reflection can also guide them to higher levels of musical achievement. With activities sequenced into a curriculum, this can include teaching their peers in a guitar class a chord progression from their favorite song. And this could be coupled with a worksheet or a journal entry that asks students why they chose that song and what it means to them. And it could also ask the students why they chose to teach the chord progression in the way that they did and whether or not they thought it was successful. If this was an assignment that I were to read, it would also inform the educator how the students think and why they might have chosen to teach the most difficult chord first. And it kind of gives me an insight into their brain and the way that they process music. And this leads directly into authentic musical practices. The order in which students taught the chords for their favorite song might be informed by a YouTube video or online fingering charts, or maybe their parents play the guitar and their parents taught them this song. These are things that exist in the real world of music creation, and they're often not addressed in the school music classroom. The curriculum should allow students to interact with music in a way that is approximate to the ways they might interact with music outside of the classroom. I learned how to play the ukulele by watching YouTube videos and figuring out new strumming patterns and how to play a difficult chord, and students can do the same thing. So if you give them the tools to do that, they might be empowered to do music outside of your classroom. And by giving students experiences that are out of context, like you aren't going to teach them a gospel song by looking right at the notation, because that's not the way that it would happen in a gospel choir, in a place where gospel music is created. If you give them experiences that are out of context, their education no longer becomes applicable in the real world. So finally, how does this work with the 2014 National Core Music Standards, which are Create, Perform, Respond, and Connect? And curriculum is an explicitly and implicitly intentional set of interactions. This is the definition. Designed to facilitate learning and development and to impose meaning on experiences. This definition of curriculum can work hand in hand with the core art standards. An explicit curriculum that requires students to create, perform, respond, and connect shows students that their contributions to the musical community and the classroom community and the social community are all important. This definition highlights that curriculum is led by interactions between teachers and students, which, in a student-centered classroom, goes hand in hand with constant dialogue. You're always interacting, you're always talking to one another, figuring out what works for who and what this means to your neighbor. This interactive dialogue brings meaning to the happenings in the music classroom, which thus brings about connecting with the music and the teacher and each other. Reflective experiences help the students to better respond with the curriculum emotionally and musically, which then informs and improves their performance. And finally, an explicit curriculum that allows time for students to create music can also allow them experiences of authentic musical composition. I think that if this definition was embodied in a school music curriculum, it would cause administrators and educators to reflect on what is being taught and why, and what isn't being taught and why, and how that sets the tone for the interactions in the school community and the society.